Joe Hunk on the line with us, talking Auburn, talking Alabama, 97.7 ESPN, The Zone. Okay, we covered the coaching portion of this thing. Now we got the NFL draft. Of course, LSU got completely ravaged by early entries last year. It's always going to hit a program like Auburn fairly hard, but I think it's the damage is pretty minimal with the likes of Christian Tutt, Seth Williams, Eli Stove, and Anthony Schwartz.
Yeah, no, and some of those are kind of questionnaire to me. And the reason I say they're questionnaire is because Anthony Schwartz has a very unique path in this world. We don't know, and we still don't know what his thought process is when it comes to adventures outside of college football. Because for people that don't know, Anthony Schwartz is also an Olympic level sprinter. And there was talk of him even going into this football season, if the Olympics hadn't been postponed, that he may try to make the Olympic team. Well, now with the Olympics postponed up until next season, there's still that thought of, hey, would Anthony Schwartz want to go this direction or not? And the problem with this now is that the Olympics next year is going to happen right during camp for the NFL. So if Schwartz is going to, he's going to have to make that decision, but he is going, and he says he's going to enter the NFL. That's probably the most interesting to me, because even though he did leave, he had that option to come back because of the way that he, the way that the college football season ended up being, where everybody had an extra year of eligibility. I don't think Eli Stove dropped a pass this entire season. I think his future is going to be probably in a slot wide receiver role. I think that's going to be another place for Anthony Schwartz. But, with the players that are coming behind him, whether it is Capers, whether it's Kobe Hudson, or players, even Kalen Newton. Yes, that name should sound familiar because the Newton name is the reason why. Is even those players, they may be making a dent on this. We've talked in the past and about when it comes to recruiting in the players for Auburn that are coming in, and there's a tight end that is coming in to Auburn that has this potential of being and could be the one of the best receivers on the team is Cal Calcaterra. Yeah, or that's how I said that name right. And so with him, he was at Oklahoma one of the best tight ends in the country until he started having concussion issues, and that's the reason why he stepped away from football. Now he did sign on National Signing Day, so he is official. And the question's going to be with him is how Auburn is going to utilize him, because he still has that ability to be the best tight end in college football, especially now that Kyle Pitts is going to the NFL. How is Auburn going to use him? So they have a lot of question marks going into 2021, especially at the wide receiver position. But going through that bowl game, I really do think, this is me personally, this is nothing I've talked to with anybody else. I really believe that even though Brian Harsin didn't coach the bowl game, I have a feeling that he had a say-so and what happened. And I really do believe that him or Kevin Steele, one of the two, said, look, we want to get these younger players some action so that they can be more prepared going into the spring and going into next season. And I think that if you're an Auburn fan, as bad as that game did look at times between Auburn and Northwestern, to go back and watch some of the wide receivers, and you can really see a good future when it comes to the wide receiver core at Auburn, which was not the case 10 years ago. And it definitely after the national championship year in 2010, that next year, that whole offense was totally ravaged, and there was nobody behind them because Auburn didn't recruit that well. Skill player-wise, Auburn recruits very well. It's the offensive line that's come into question, which is why I've emphasized that so much here on the show today.
Yeah, if you're the head coach coming in the next year and it's not going to go on your record, why not get the reps in against a quality team for your young players to get them set for 2021? Might as well do that.
And it's Grant Calcaterra, by the way. I said Cal Calcaterra. It's Grant Calcaterra, sorry.
Yeah, 41 catches at Oklahoma, 9 touchdowns, 15.5 yards per reception. That's a high-end figure for a tight end getting downfield, making big plays. So he'll be maybe a security blanket for Bo Nix. Elsewhere in the transfer portal, I don't know if there's anything significant there. They got a center from Harvard. Anything on the recruiting trail? We know that it was a disappointing get in December for Gus Malzahn at the time, and now he turns that over to Brian Harsin, so I'm sure he's going to really want to bust it and try to make a couple quality pickups, I would think, for February.
Well, and that's where this offseason is going to be extremely unique. And when it does come to the recruiting side, I know that we talked to Jeffrey Lee today from auburnsports.com, and he said that there are 2 5-star offensive linemen that absolutely love all the offensive hires, especially Will Friend coming in. And I don't know if that means anything for the cycle coming up in February, but it could mean a lot for 2022's class. The other thing that's going to be unique about this cycle, and I think that somewhere where Auburn could be very beneficial with this, is because of the fact that everybody can transfer. I mean, in all reality, anybody from any football program can have a free year of transferring, and it doesn't get held against them next football season. I'm going to be interested to see what football players transfer into Auburn from other places because of the changes. I think that there are the changes that have happened with Auburn is not so much a sleeping giant type thing, but they have this mystique about them because outside of Clemson, they're the only team that has beaten Alabama multiple times in like the last 5 years. LSU's only done it once in the last 5 years. Auburn's done it multiple times. So that part of being able to beat the best team in the country is kind of added this idea of, wait a second, I want to kind of pay attention to those guys. And I want to see if Brian Harsin, as well as Mike Bobo and Will Friend and even Derek Mason, go to their former teams and say, come on, you can come with us and you can have a good role for this football team. So I want to see how this transfer portal is going to react and act when it comes to the rules that are just specifically for this offseason. But at the same time, Auburn starts classes in the next few days. So if there's going to be some players that are coming in the spring, they're going to kind of need to do so and do so quickly.
Joe Hunk on the line, 97.7 ESPN, The Zone. Always a good conversation with Joe. Amazing stuff on Auburn and Alabama. So when we look at a national championship game, we saw an Alabama performance against Notre Dame, which was pretty standard Alabama. They didn't seem like they needed to flex their muscles too much. They did what they needed to do. They dominated and were certainly superior on the outside and at the speed and skill positions. Notre Dame put up a bit of a fight in the trenches. Ohio State, though, the X factor, the wild card was, we know that they've got all this top 3 talent, but man, they put it all together against Clemson. So what's your angle on this one?
Well, for me, Alabama, when they went into that game on last Friday, they basically tried to keep it very, I don't say very vanilla, but they also tried to take the air out of the ball quickly. And Devontae Smith had his touchdowns. You saw how well Najee Harris did. We all know about the leap and what happened. I still feel bad for McLeod on that. But that all Alabama team said, look, we are going to almost treat this like a spring game. I would love to see the playbook calls for that entire football game because I really want to say that it was a lot fewer in number and not in multiple plays than what it was for Ohio State. For Ohio State, Justin Fields' health is going to be the biggest X factor for this football team. As great as Trey Sermon is, as great as this offensive line is, the one area that Justin Fields could really hurt Alabama is being able to get out in space and being able to make yardage up that way and allowing also his receivers to get open so that he can pass them the football. You saw after he got hurt against Clemson, he basically would run for a second and get down as quickly as he possibly could so that he didn't get hit again. And I really want to see how well he does and how much he does on Monday night against Alabama, because that to me is the biggest determining factor of if Ohio State's going to be able to score 30 points or if they're going to be able to score 45 points, because it's going to take the latter for them to keep up with Alabama. Alabama's secondary is questionable, and that's where Ohio State can take advantage of it. But if Justin Fields isn't up to 100%, then it may be something that Alabama could do a lot of damage if they start getting pressure on him.
And to Alabama fans who haven't picked up on this one yet, Ohio State's secondary is questionable. They're almost mirror images of each other with great wide receiver play, although Alabama's is in like another stratosphere. But Ohio State, great wide receiver play, tremendous tight ends, great quarterbacks. It's just across the line. We saw what Ohio State did to Clemson on both line of scrimmages. It was just devastating. Justin Fields having the running aspect, if healthy, gives him an advantage in the comparison of quarterbacks. But I am going to be shocked if you're not picking Alabama to win. So I'll phrase the question this way, Joe. How do you think the matchup shakes out? What kind of game is this going to be? An epic classic, or is Alabama just too good?
No, this is going to be a fantastic football game, and I think it's going to be a close football game even in the fourth quarter, because the reason why people didn't want Ohio State in the college football playoff and in the national championship game has nothing to do with their ability. They are an extremely talented football team that, honestly, in college football, they are the only ones that can rival Alabama right now, as long as Clemson's having its health issues. But especially like Justin Ross and those players for Clemson that's not playing there, that had nothing to do with it. It was the lack of football games, the fact they play 1 week off the next, play 1 week off the next, play 1 week off the next. And even though that a lot of that was not their fault, it was hey, you're changing the rules and you're bending the rules. And so I think that is where this all comes into question. Is the part of this for Alabama is, are they going to be able to stop Justin Fields and going to be able to slow down Trey Sermon? Because Ohio State does have tremendous receivers. Olave is a tremendous wide receiver that can really take that top off of Alabama's secondary speed, especially if he's going up against Josh Jobe. So I want to see if that's where they're going to take advantage of this. If Justin Fields can start completing passes, that's when now you're going to see if Trey Sermon's going to take over on the running game. Look, as far as Alabama winning, yes, I do believe they're going to win because they're the more talented team. I also believe that they're the more motivated football team, because I've been listening to a lot of podcasts and a lot of stuff happening in the state of Ohio. And Ohio, for about a good 3 to 4 days, celebrated beating Clemson like they had just won the national championship. And I don't know if they're going to be able to flip that switch to do like they did in the past. They can use motivation of nobody wants us here and we're the underdogs all they want. But Alabama and these football players that came back, Najee Harris, Devontae Smith, all of those, they all came back for a purpose, and that is to end this. And that Alex Leatherwood is another one. So that's the reason why they came back. I do think Alabama's the more motivated football team. I do think they're going to win. I wouldn't be shocked, though, if this is absolutely inside of that number of 8.5 that we're looking at it being around right now, because this could come down to the last minute or two, and Alabama may be up by 3 points or something, and they could just kick a field goal and make Ohio State drive the length of the field, or they could put a touchdown in late where Ohio State can't come back. I do feel like this is going to be a great football game all the way up until the very end. It could be a classic.
And, Joe, for those people that are into the historical, the name brands, the narrative, big picture, I don't think you can get two programs together on the same football field that have more cachet, because Clemson, Alabama has been that postseason rivalry that's been developed over the last 5 years, but Clemson doesn't have the history that Ohio State. If you look at the current landscape of college football and combine it with the historical, these are the two juggernauts historically.
Oh, absolutely. And it goes back to the same reason why Kentucky and Duke hate each other. It's about national championships. And it's always about, hey, it's not about who we're playing in our conference. It's about when we get to the Final Four, we're about to play somebody else. And if it's Kentucky and Duke, it's going to be crazy. You also look at, the history of the two teams whenever they actually played each other. And, I don't think this is a motivating factor for the players on the field. And honestly, with as much turnover as Saban has had in the last decade, I don't even think anybody that coached for Alabama in that 2014 game is even on the staff anymore, except for Nick Saban. So I think that is more of a motivation for fans and for people that call into the radio show, and that because they want revenge for what happened in New Orleans when Ohio State went on to win the national championship with Ezekiel Elliott. That's also the reason why you're hearing that Ezekiel Elliott comparison with Trey Sermon, is because he's had that football season kind of like Ezekiel Elliott did back in 2014, where he came on late and he had a major game in the Big Ten championship game, had a major game in the semifinals, and now this is where you are. And even going into the national championship game, Ezekiel Elliott had another great game there. So I think that in the history of the two teams, the other one is Notre Dame, and Alabama already disposed of them. And honestly, unlike Ohio State, Notre Dame just isn't there yet when it comes to the bodies on the football fields and the playmakers that they need to take that next step. They're a tremendous football team, but Ian Book isn't a game changer. He's a game maker, and you saw it against North Carolina earlier in the year, but he's not a game changer, and he didn't have the it factor the way that Alabama had not one, two. They had 3 it factors on that team. If Notre Dame can recruit that way, they're doing it physically, but now they need the game changers. Ohio State has that. They have Justin Fields. They have Trey Sermon. They have Olave. They have all those players. That is where this is such a great matchup. And when these teams get on the field, it just looks beautiful. It just looks like it's meant to be like that, like when Texas and Michigan play each other. It just looks good to see them on the field together.
Yeah, it looks like an NFL game because they're all going to be in the NFL.
That's absolutely right. And all these players are going to be in the NFL. It just may not be next year or the year after, but they're going to be in the NFL because that's all these two teams produce is NFL talent.
Joe Hunk, 97.7 ESPN The Zone. Joe, it's always a great conversation. Always appreciate everything you bring us.
Well, I appreciate you always having me on, man. Seriously.